Hi there, it's me, Audrina again, and I'm here to read from my book, Where Did Your Heart Go? First book in the Heart Trilogy series, and we're now up to chapter 36. So settle back, relax, and we'll get going. After they'd eaten, we went upstairs so that Charlotte could pack her bag and get her leathers ready back on for the ride home. Mitchell took great care in zipping up the jacket for her before he pulled her into his arms. "You're like a magnet, I just keep getting pulled towards you." Charlie smiled up at him. "I could get used to being your magnet," she replied, parting her lips slightly so that she could run her tongue over them before his lips came down to capture hers. When they reached the hallway, Jester came bounding over and poked his nose into her hand for a stroke, as if he somehow knew she was going. James appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Are you taking Charlotte home now?" "Yes, Dad. I'll be back later." "Thanks for letting me stay, Jim," Charlotte said. "It was nice to meet you." She extended her arm to him, but James had other thoughts and pulled her into his arms. "Thank you, Charlotte. You don't know how much Mitchell meeting you may have helped me get my life back on track," he said, dropping a kiss on her forehead. They were about to leave when Jester started to bark and they saw Pam and Peter in the hallway. "We didn't want to miss saying goodbye to Charlotte," Pam said, pulling Charlie in for another embrace. "We're both looking forward to the dance competition. We caught a glimpse of the two of you in the garden yesterday," Peter said, reaching out to also hug Charlie. Shaking his head, he turned to James. "So like her mum," he murmured, and Charlie smiled at the compliment. "Please give her our love," Pam said. "Come on, Charlie, we better get going," Mitch said, taking her hand. Charlotte climbed on the motorcycle behind him and held tight as the engine shuddered beneath them. Charlie thought Mitch was showing off as he put his foot down, confident in the feel of the bike beneath him. Charlie's hands wrapped tighter round his torso, and he almost felt her heart beating in time as they sped along the roads. Pulling onto the driveway of Charlie's home, they both dismounted, and Mitch helped Charlie remove her helmet, at the same time taking the opportunity to kiss her. She held it out for him, but he shook his head. "You keep it here. It matches your leathers." "Thank you," Charlie replied, realising what this symbolised. Mitch had no intention of asking anyone else to ride pillion with him. It was a small statement of his claim upon her, and Charlie loved it, smiling up at him, drowning a little further in his eyes. The door was unlocked, so they went in and breathed in the smell of stew. "Mum, we're home," shouted Charlie, dumping her bag and helmet at the bottom of the stairs as they entered the kitchen. "Hi, Charlie. Hi, Mitchell," Steph said, turning from the counter to see their smiling faces. "How was the weekend?" "Great, thanks, Stephanie," Mitchell replied, removing his jacket and then turning to watch Charlie unzipping hers, desire burning in his eyes. Charlie poured them both a drink as they sat down on the stools by the island unit. "How did the routine go?" Charlie's mum asked. Curious to hear all about it, she took the stool opposite, cup of tea in hand. "It was amazing, Mum. Mitchell got his brother to film it, and then we watched it on the television, and it looked almost like the real thing," Charlie gushed, glancing over at Mitchell, eyes just as hungry for him. "Oh, and I met Mitchell's dad and his grandparents, and Jester the dog," she said, careful to avoid saying their names, in case her mum guessed. "My brother should finish editing the recording tomorrow, ready to send off, so I'll email a copy to you as soon as possible," Mitch said. "Are you staying for tea?" Steph asked. "I made a pot of stew, so there's plenty." "That sounds great," Mitchell said. "It'll be ready in about an hour." "OK, Mum, we'll be upstairs." Upstairs, Charlie dumped her bag and carefully placed the helmet on the stool under the window. She put the samba music on from the club, turning towards Mitchell. "I think I may need your help with these leathers again," she said, breathless with anticipation for the feel of his hands on her body. Now that I'm happy to do," Mitchell replied, "so long as you'll help me with mine." "Deal." Mitchell put one hand firmly on the waistband of her leathers as he located the zip and started to pull it down. Kneeling in front of her, he managed to get them to her ankles, and as she steadied herself by holding onto his shoulder, he was able to pull them over her feet, each in turn. and he slowly ran his hands back up her legs, over her jeans, and then to the hemline of her t-shirt. His hands touched the skin of her belly as they ran to discover that she wore no bra. His fingers encountered her already erect nipples. She ran her fingers through his hair and then slowly stretched them above her head so that he took the hint and pulled it over. Then it was her turn. She reached down and undid the bottom of his leathers and slowly bent down, easing them off and throwing them aside. Her hands travelled up over the outside of his jeans and then on up and under his t-shirt. She mirrored his moves from minutes before, but as she was shorter than him, she struggled to get the t-shirt all the way up. With a quick move, he helped her with this, and then ran his hands down her back, revelling in the feel of her smooth skin as he reached her bum. In a swift move, he picked her up and he walked easily with her in his grasp to the bed. He laid her down on the soft covers and paused for a moment to drink in the sight of Charlie beneath him. Charlie lay there, beneath his hot gaze, his pupils burning an invisible path over her skin, deciding where they would touch first. She reached up to him. "I'm getting cold," she warned, even though that was the furthest thing from the truth. "Are you?" he said softly, leaning down to blow on her breasts. "You getting warmer?" he asked. She shook her head but grinned up at him at the same time. He watched her pupils widen as he gently blew on the other, and her body arched to get closer to his mouth. "And now?" he teased. Charlie loved his wicked grin, deliberately licking her lips before her arms reached out, drawing his body onto hers. The buckles on their belts hit and rubbed against each other, metal on metal, as Mitchell and Charlie pressed hot skin onto hot skin. Charlie writhed beneath Mitchell's weight. Her hands ran all over the muscles of his back as the beat from the Latin music seemed to make the atmosphere grow warmer. They paused and looked into each other's eyes, green pools of desire rippling and spreading between them. "I think I'm in love with you," Charlotte said, directly at him. She trembled, feeling both certain and afraid of what he would say in reply. "I think I'm in love with you too," he said, his gaze telling her no lies. It was a wondrous moment as time seemed to stand still. "Tea's ready," Charlie's mum shouted from downstairs, interrupting the moment. "We'll be down in a minute," Charlie replied, though not wanting to move from where she lay. Charlie and Mitchell's hearts were beating in perfect time, their eyes locked onto each other. It felt strange to have to stand up again. Charlie's legs were still shaking as Mitchell threw her the t-shirt he'd removed earlier, also pulling his back on. With shaking fingers, Charlotte tried to do the same, but in the end Mitch took it from her, placed it over her head as if she were a small child. Sitting down for dinner, Charlie noticed there was something different about her mum, who seemed happier. "You okay, Mum? You look sort of different." "Yes, fine, honey. Had a good weekend while you were away." "Is it okay for Mitch to come down next weekend?" Charlotte asked, not wanting to waste her mother's obvious good mood. "Yes, that's fine," Steph replied, watching the two young lovers exchange looks and smiles. After dinner, Steph retired on the conservatory with her laptop to continue working on the Rock on the River event, while Charlie and Mitch cleared up in the kitchen. Bubbles overflowed in the sink and some got lodged in some strange places. The happiness was infectious as Steph went to investigate the screams coming from the kitchen. Scooping up a handful and lobbing them at Charlie, they landed in her hair, and Mitch squashed them and added his own handful. "Next time you want to play with Bubbles, do it in the garden," Steph joked. Charlie stopped after a final handful had been placed down the back of Mitch's shirt and patted in. "Well, I guess I better be going," Mitch said, as the clock showed it was nearly 9. Charlie's face fell as she realised this was the moment for goodbye. "Bye, Mitch, I'll see you again next weekend," Steph said, pulling him into a quick hug. Steph still couldn't help but compare his body to how James's used to feel at that age. "I'll walk you out," Charlie said, taking his hand in hers. Before he put his helmet on, Mitchell pulled Charlotte into his arms for one last time, enfolding her tight against his body. "Until next Friday," he murmured. "I'll miss you," Charlotte replied, her voice soft and soothing. "I'll miss you too, but at least we can text and call each other, and I'll drop you the film file when I send it off on Tuesday morning." I'll be keeping my fingers crossed, she replied, laying her cheek against the cool, smooth leather of his jacket. Charlie breathed in and out, trying to savour the intoxicating scent of Mitchell that lay just beneath the surface. She didn't want to let him go, not after this evening and the precious exchange of love. As he slipped from her grasp, she watched as he mounted the bike and turned on the engine. The last thing she saw were his beautiful green eyes before he flipped down the visor and then rode off down the road. She hugged herself tight as she wandered back into the house. She was too happy to cry, and after all, it would only be a week before she'd see him again. "You okay?" Charlie's mum asked, poking her head back into the kitchen. "Yes, Mum," Charlie said, perching on a stool. "There is definitely something different about you, Mum," she said, reaching over to turn on the radio. "Perhaps there is," Steph replied. "The plans for Rock on the River are going really well, and I was wondering if you wanted a time slot for your group to dance," Steph asked, putting the kettle on. "Yes, please, Mum, that would be great. Can I see if Mitchell's group want to take part too? I saw what they're planning to do for Thriller and it's amazing," she gushed, her mind drifting off for a split second. "Yes, you can ask him next weekend when he's here." "Mum?" "Yes, Charlie?" "When Mitch stays next weekend, can he share my room?" she asked, uncertainty in her voice. "Yes, of course he can. I trust you both," Steph replied. "I'm guessing it's getting serious between you two." "Yes, Mum, and thanks. Shall I make us a hot chocolate?" "Sounds good to me." Charlie wrestled with her conscience, desperate to tell her mum all about James and Mitchell being his son. She wondered whether her mum had been listening to the radio when James put out the dedication. Something had definitely put a spring in Stephanie's step. "Something you want to tell me?" Steph asked, watching her daughter. "No, I'm off to bed," she replied, taking her hot chocolate with her. "OK, night, sweetheart," Steph said, watching her daughter head for the stairs. Charlie's pale skin seemed to glow in the evening light as her curls bounced on her shoulders. So that's the end of chapter 36. Don't forget, if you do want to read on ahead, you can download the book for free off my website, which is www.audrinalane.co.uk, or you can find me on Amazon, just search Audrina Lane. And if you want a paperback copy, I still have a few in stock with me here. So if you don't want to just buy it directly from Amazon, please get in touch with me and I'd be more than happy to sign you a copy and send it over. Anyway, take care and bye for now.